All right, let's just get right into it. I want you to try and forget everything you think you know about North America before 1492. Because today we're going to uncover the real story of a continent that was anything but empty. We're talking about a world of hundreds of distinct, self-governing nations that had been thriving for thousands of years. This is foundational history.
So when you picture North America before European contact, what comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's probably this image of a vast, an untamed wilderness, maybe a silent landscape. But was it really just an empty land waiting for history to begin? Was it a world without structure, without complex societies?
Well, the reality is so much more incredible than that. The land was not empty, not even close. It was a continent literally teeming with hundreds of distinct nations, each with complex economies and a history as deep and as rich as any on Earth. So no, this is not just a prelude to European arrival. This is a powerful story all on its own.
Okay, so how were these societies organized? Because these weren't just scattered groups wandering around. These were established nations built on incredibly sophisticated systems of self-governance that were developed and refined over centuries, even millennia.
And this is where we have to dismantle a really common and persistent myth, the whole idea of scattered, wandering tribes. It just doesn't hold up to reality. What was really happening was this network of complex, organized societies. These were nations with their own legal systems. Think about the Haudenosaunee's Great Law of Peace, which is this incredible model for consensus-based democracy. They used diplomacy, they forged treaties, and they had clear, established ways of governing themselves.
And get this, we are not talking about just a handful of groups here. At the time of contact, there were over 600 distinct First Nations in what we now call Canada alone. And that's not even counting the Inuit across the Arctic or the Métis Nation that would emerge later. Every single one was unique, with its own language, its own culture, its own government. The diversity was just immense.
And here is why this is so critical to understand today. This isn't just ancient history. This long legacy of self-governance is the absolute root of modern Indigenous rights and claims to sovereignty. It proves that these rights were never granted by another government. They are and always have been inherent.
Of course, you can't have these powerful systems of government without equally sophisticated economic systems to support them. And they were built on this remarkable foundation of balance and sustainability that really shaped every single aspect of life.
Yeah. Forget any image of simple day-to-day survival. We are talking about complex economies with these vast trade networks that crisscross the entire continent. You had goods like obsidian from the Rockies and shells from the Gulf Coast moving thousands of miles inland. They practiced brilliant sustainable resource management and developed sophisticated agriculture, like the famous Three Sisters crops of corn, beans, and squash, and even aquaculture that fed huge settled populations. These were economies truly based on reciprocity, not just on extraction.
And at the very heart of these economies was a core philosophy. The goal wasn't just to take from the land, but to live with it. This idea of sustainable living meant that resources were managed to make absolutely sure they'd be there for future generations. It was a long-term vision that was woven directly into the cultural and economic fabric of their societies. Okay, so we've established a continent of self-governing nations with complex, sustainable economies. So what? Why is it so absolutely critical to understand this foundation before we even begin to look at what came next?
Because, and this is the key, this is so much more than ancient history. This pre-contact world is the bedrock of the present. Understanding this legacy of autonomy, of complexity, and of sustainability, it gives you the essential context for everything that followed. From the signing of treaties and the imposition of assimilation policies, all the way to the ongoing journey of reconciliation today.
This idea is just essential. To really truly grasp what was lost and what must be restored in the process of reconciliation, you have to start here. You just have to. You have to start with an appreciation for the world as it was. A world of nations that were autonomous, self-sufficient, and deeply, deeply connected. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Knowing that North America was a continent of established nations, with their own sophisticated systems of law and trade and sustainability, how does that change our understanding of the history that unfolded over the next 500 years?